Well, if you enjoyed our first session, you are going to really enjoy session number 2. Rick is an outstanding teacher. Of course, we have gone through his Constitution coaching camps in our church. We've got a new 4-week session that we're going to do on Wednesday nights very shortly after we celebrate the 4th of July. We're going to finish the study that we're doing now and then do this 4-week study that Patriot Academy is introducing. So it is my joy to reintroduce my good friend. Please give another warm welcome to Rick Green from Patriot Academy. There you go,
that was a great video on it. That's really good. Man, talk about great teachers. That video was fantastic. And Paul's exactly right. We've got to get better at communicating our messages and effectively influencing this next generation that's just been lied to so much. And that what you just watched is exactly what we need more of. Okay, so for those of you that were sitting this morning and didn't make it to the first session, no, I'm just kidding. But seriously, for those of you that didn't make it, just a quick reminder to everybody else and just to show you real quick what we're talking about. We're working out of Psalm 78 here, passing it along to the next generation. We're talking about how to pass the torch effectively, how to preserve what God's given us, the truths that He's given us, how to make disciples of the next generation, teaching them God's fame and fortune, the marvelous things He's done, so that the next generation will know, and all the generations to come. So they'll know the truth, tell the story, so their children can trust in God, never forgetting the works of God, but keeping His commands to the letter. Heaven forbid they be like their parents. Okay, so we talked about doing this with our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor, and the fact that means our time, our money, our reputation. Breaking it down, that simply means, first of all, just becoming informed citizens, taking the time to study a little bit about what's going on in the world and what the Bible says about those things. Taking the time to study, what does our Constitution actually say? If I'm going to be a biblical citizen, that means I got to know what the Bible says about all this, but then I also got to know how to do that in my country, the nation that I've been blessed to live in, and that means knowing our Constitution and studying our founding documents. So that's actually a command that the founders gave us as well. That's John Jay. He was first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, did some of the Federalist Papers, so a pretty big influence on the Constitution actually getting ratified. He said every member of the state, that just means every citizen, so all of us, whether you're a teacher or preacher or whatever, every member of the state ought diligently to read and study the Constitution. And I love this line, and teach the rising generation to be free. By knowing their rights, they'll sooner perceive when they've been violated and be the better prepared to defend and assert them. So right there we get kind of the framework of why we study our citizenship, why we study what the Bible says about how to treat our neighbors. That's all part of our time, becoming an informed citizen. I mentioned the Founders Bible earlier. It's just a great way both to study God's Word and study how to apply it in our country. I think it's the most important thing David Barton ever put out. Really encourage you to get that and study it. Reagan gave us a pretty good warning about 40 years ago. This was actually whenever he was giving his farewell address. He was January of 89, and he was basically saying, look, if we forget what we did, we won't know who we are. Meaning, if we don't study history, if we don't know what America did, what our people have done, if we don't know what our nation has done, and I mean all of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, if we don't know those things, we won't know who we are. He said, I'm warning of an eradication of the American memory that could result ultimately in an erosion of the American spirit. Again, practically, that's exactly what happened to our country. We stopped teaching history, we stopped teaching civics, we stopped telling the stories of our founders, stopped telling the stories of our heroes, and when we stopped teaching that, we lost our patriotism, we lost the American spirit. And we've had children marching in the streets in 2020, first with the whole Black Lives Mafia thing. Yes, I meant to say mafia. Black Lives Mafia thing to the Antifa and all that nonsense of 2020, burning cities across the country, to the whole Palestinian thing on the campuses and the lies that they've been told. All of that was able to take root so that you have children out there, and I mean children by 18, 19, 20 years old. They believe they're marching in a righteous cause. They have bought the lies hook, line, and sinker. They don't have patriotism. We are the only nation I know of that taught our own children to hate their own nation. We poured that cultural Marxism into them, made them think that America was the great Satan. I mean, all of that stuff was done through our education system with our tax dollars. We paid for it. And I'm going to get in your kitchen for a second here, but a lot of us sent our own kids to some of these universities using our own money to indoctrinate our children with that kind of philosophy. And by the way, if I'm stepping on your toes this morning, I apologize. My intent is to stomp on them. I don't care if I offend you. I try to channel the Founding Fathers as much as I can. And Patrick Henry had this great opening to his "Give me liberty or give me death" speech. You know, everybody remembers that line at the very end. But at the beginning of the speech, he says, "According to the magnitude of the subject ought to be the freedom of the debate. Only in this way can we arrive at the truth. And should I hold back my opinions out of fear of giving offense, I'll offend the great creator of the universe." In other words, I don't care if I offend you. I want to make sure I'm not offending God. I want to make sure that we're speaking truth. So anyway, all of this indoctrination, we allowed it to happen on our watch. Even if you were, we homeschooled our kids. I was homeschooled. I was homeschooled back when you didn't answer the front door. You hid under the bed if somebody was knocking on the door. And people would stop my mom, and say, "Wow, you're homeschooled. What a sacrifice." And she always stopped them. No, it's an investment. It's an investment in the next generation. And so I was blessed to get to have that. I did them all: homeschool, private school, and public school. I experienced all of it. But my point is, we did that it happened on our watch. A lot of us even, we contributed to it. When I say us, I mean as a community, as the church, as conservatives even. And we allowed that to happen, and it definitely eroded the American spirit. In fact, it became, that's why they use these terms like Christian nationalists and all that, because they're basically making you think that patriotism is bad. They're literally making you think that you're the bad guy because you're waving the American flag. And they convinced a lot of these kids of that. So exactly what Reagan warned us about is exactly what happened. We've had that erosion of the American spirit. And of course, this is just kind of the nature of man, right? Tough times, hard times make tough men. And then tough men lead us into good times. And then those good times make us soft. And then we get soft leaders and weak men, and then that leads us back into the tough times. That's the cycle of nations. Typically, it's a 250-year cycle. Well, guess what? America is at the 250 years. And we came really, really close to allowing a significant amount of tough times to happen in this country. And that could still happen. I'm not guaranteeing anything this morning. I think we've been given a little bitty window of opportunity. The window's cracked open. We've got to shove that thing all the way open and dive through. And if we take advantage of this window of opportunity, this reprieve that the Lord's given us, and we do exactly what Ronald Reagan says right here, then I think we can restore the biblical foundations of the country and therefore get back into the good times that come from lining up with the laws of nature and nature's God. So Reagan said the way to do that, more attention to American history and a greater emphasis on civic ritual. Civic ritual is just an opportunity to be able to remember the former days. It's what we saw in the Old Testament. There were times before they went to the Promised Land, all kinds of times where they recounted the entire history. They remembered the former days. And I just wish that there was some date coming up that would be significant, maybe a birthday for the country that perhaps, if only we had a document we could celebrate that talked about truth and the Creator and lives and fortunes and sick. Of course we have the opportunity for civic ritual. Next weekend, not this coming weekend, but the weekend after, great opportunity for civic ritual. July 4th is our Independence Day. We're going to celebrate the Declaration of Independence. And then a year from this one will be the big one that Paul was talking about, the 250th. So I think we've got this wonderful, wonderful opportunity where the very medicine that we need to heal the patient, this patriotism based in truth and based in biblical values, that's the medicine, that we have the opportunity to administer it to the patient at exactly the right time when the patient desperately needs it and is actually willing to take it. We're going to have so much happening over the next year where the president's going to constantly be talking about the 250th. There's going to be a lot of celebrations between now and July 4th of 2026. Our goal and what we're pushing for and what Pastor Paul and I are working on is not just getting ready for a bunch of parties on July 4th next year where we have fireworks that are going to fizzle, where we all have a lot of great hot dogs and all that kind of, not just a celebration in one day, not just a pomp and circumstance. We'll do all that. John Adams suggested that we do all that. We're going to do that. But what we want to do is actually lay the groundwork so that when people on July 4th of 2026 are waving the flag, they understand why that flag is worthy of being waved. They understand what this is that we're celebrating and what it is that we're passing on so that it can be a potentially, I don't think the Lord's going to tarry that long, but if he does tarry, because no man knows the day, right? But if he does, then we can last maybe another 250 years or at least for our children and grandchildren. So here's a quick preview of what we've been putting together. The purpose of this course is to make sure that they know why that flag is worthy of being waved.
Wherever you are watching from, we're not rebuilding a structure without giving the right foundation.
And our burden should be to transform a moment into a movement. The entire globe is moving towards the right.
Recommend this edition of the Bible to the inhabitants of the United States. I thought our founding fathers were a bunch of atheists, agnostics, and deists who wanted a secular public square, who didn't want the Bible in schools.
Fight like it's your last breath.
But know this, the truth is over the facts, that God's not giving you a spirit of fear, but a power, love, and a sound mind.
What do I want my legacy to be on the way out? That I was safe or that I was dangerous?
Amen. No, this nation is not perfect. I'll take America for any other country or nation on the face of this planet. How about you?
All right. So we also have some great footage with Pastor Paul that's going in there, but we don't want to scare people off from taking the class. So we don't put that in the promo. We sneak it in right at the end when they're not looking, which is we already had one football player up there with Amanchuku. If I had two, it would be. Anyway, okay, so it's actually going to be, and it'll be fun, I promise you that. We're really adamant about this at Patriot Academy. I hate boring history, and I hate just lectures, so we're going to make sure this class is fun. But let me just kind of lay out for you in the Declaration what Jefferson gives to us. So let's back up. Since we got this coming up in 10 days, and I'm encouraging you not just to wait till next year, but for your July 4th thing this year, wherever you're getting together with family at the church here, whatever you're going to do, that you actually break out the Declaration and read the Declaration and maybe even have people come up and sign it. For sure in 2026, get you a blown up copy for the 250th. And we're going to even have an outline of ceremonies that we're going to encourage 5,000 celebrations across the country to do this. And you make that commitment. You actually pledge your life, fortune, sacred honor by signing the document. But we'll just back up for a second and remind ourselves what Jefferson told us. So you look at the Declaration, you recognize what they were facing. You recognize they're going against the greatest military on the planet, their own country. And they said, we've got to explain to people why we would do this, because it's a little bit insane. Why are we doing this? And so he said, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to another, and to assume among the powers of the earth that separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitles them, a decent respect to the opinion of mankind requires that they declare, so that's why we call it declaration, declare the causes which impel them to the separation. In other words, they didn't want to do it, they were impelled to the separation. And so then he describes in the next 56 words the frame of America. Now, when I say the frame of America, what I mean by that, these next 56 words are the frame that is holding your picture in place. So you think of the picture for you that depicts liberty or freedom. What do you love about America and what God's blessed you with here? Maybe it's a picture of your family out in front of your house. Maybe it's a picture of your community and a celebration there. Maybe it's just literally a picture of the American flag waving over the fruited plain. Whatever it is, you just, in your mind right now, take that picture and know that if this frame that holds your picture together, if the frame goes, your picture's going with it. Here's the frame. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their... You sure it's not Congress? You're endowed by your creator, not your government? You bunch of Christian nationalists. I always wondered, I don't remember, Paul, if you remember when they first started throwing that term out, and I kept going, what do they mean? What do they mean? And then finally that CNN reporter explained, she said, these people actually think that their freedom comes from God. I saw that and I was like, I think Jefferson would like to have a word with this woman. Endowed by their creator, exactly right. I mean, that changes everything. Because now, if you're not the source of my freedom, and I'm not the source of your freedom, you can't take my freedom away. And I can't take your freedom away. And if government's not the source of our freedom, government can't take it away. So we're endowed by our creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And then here's why we have government. Listen to this next line. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Such an essential part of keeping the frame in place. Reminding ourselves, the whole reason government exists, not to provide, but to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So in order to have those things, everybody says they want life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. But think about it this way. The way Jefferson laid out this frame and those 56 words, if you want life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, there are two bookends that are essential. Number one, you got to lay it on truth. You got to build it on truth. So that's why he starts. We hold these truths to be self-evident. And if we do that well, if we build it on the truths, then we'll get the outcome of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But it will go away unless we do the other bookend, consent of the governed. Protecting those things, preserving those things, teaching our children what those things actually are. Notice it says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not the guarantee of happiness. It certainly doesn't say the redistribution of happiness. Right? This is the entire free market economic system, pursuit of happiness. We can talk about that one all day, but if we want those things, we got to lay it on, we got to build it on truth, and then we got to do consent of the governed. That's what rebuilding liberty is all about, is actually doing consent of the governed, giving or refusing our consent and being engaged in the process. The system works, but we have to work the system. And so we have the freedom to do that, and we have the opportunity to do that, but we got to know how. And that's what this Rebuilding Liberty course is going to be all about, is showing us how. Because actually, let me go a little bit further in the deck first. The next line is where I think we are right now in America. Because Jefferson kind of sums up right here the secret to how we stop the 250 cycle from happening, how we keep from going into hard times to the point of losing our liberty. We have something that most people who ever lived on the planet did not have. We have the chance to interrupt the cycle and stop us from falling into complete tyranny. And it's this line right here. He said that when any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, what ends? He just described it. What are those ends? Truth, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the ability to give or refuse consent. If you manipulate the elections to the point that we're not able to give or refuse our consent, all of those things would be destructive of these ends. So that when any form of government, so not just federal, state, local, whatever, that when any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. Now, I am not suggesting we abolish all government, not at all. Government's a God-created institution. We should not be anti-government. We should be pro-government. When it's done God's way, it's a blessing. When government's in its lane, it is a blessing. When it's outside its lane, it is a curse. And it's our job to get it back on track and get it in that lane. And we do that under our system by peacefully altering or abolishing. This is the linchpin right here. We don't have to fight a war. We don't have to have a revolution with ballots. We get to have with bullets, we get to have a revolution with ballots. We get to use the system to alter or abolish freely, to actually just live out our liberty. And what I mean by that is, let's take for example, abolishment. When we abolish in our system right now, that means abolish the pieces of government that are outside of what is protecting our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Perfect example, the Federal Department of Education. Never should have been created in the first place. Completely unconstitutional. There's no authority in the Constitution for it. We didn't have it before the 70s. Jimmy Carter's the one that came up with this and pushed it through. Now, of course, if you look at the results, since we've had a Department of Education in the 70s, the education system has gotten so much better. There is nothing about the education system that got better, right? Every part of it got worse. And not all because of the Federal Department of Education, meddling and given, most of the regulations, but very little of the money. But it's been a big part of the problem. And all I'm saying is it's a part that we don't need. So abolish it. That's following what Jefferson said. Alter or abolish those things that are interrupting the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness that we should have. And altering just means altering the government back to the constitutional republic it was intended to be. There's a lot of little things we could talk about, but there's a lot of ways that altering it back to the limited government of the design of the Founding Fathers can be done. Sometimes that's going to be done through our members of Congress in Washington, D.C., or the president doing it even through an executive order. Sometimes it's going to have to be done by us at the local level with our school boards and our city councils. But there's lots of ways to alter back to the original design, and that just requires us to be engaged. And so let's look at some of those ways, some of those things that we can do. We got to know. In fact, I know Paul's talked to you before about wall builders and David Barton and David. I don't know how long you know David. Probably as long as, or maybe longer than I have. But I've been with him 25 years, and I thought, Paul, all this time, when you were doing Reclaiming Oklahoma for Christ and Reclaiming America for Christ, and we were doing all the wall builder stuff, I thought we were rebuilding the walls. Come to find out, what we were doing, we've been stuck in chapter 2 of Nehemiah all this time, convincing the king to let us go rebuild the walls. Now, here's what I mean by that. You're the king. We, the people, are the king in America. And Artaxerxes Some scholars say that Nehemiah was with Artaxerxes for about a decade before he got permission to go rebuild the walls. So we've been for decades convincing the American people there's cracks in the foundation, folks. This is going to be a problem to the culture. If you redefine marriage, it's going to do this to the culture, and we're going to end up at a place where we don't even know what a woman is. We were trying to warn, and all these things were happening, and we've been trying to say we need to rebuild the walls, we need to rebuild, and we're just now to the place where the king, the people, have said, yeah, there's a problem. You need to go rebuild those walls. So now we have permission to rebuild the walls. That's the appetite of the American people right now. It's literally, you can just feel it. We also need King Artaxerxes to foot the bill. So we, the people, you got to be contributing more and more. That's that fortune part that we got to get to. But I think that's where we are in rebuilding liberty, is right there in the book of Nehemiah in chapter 2, where we now have permission, and there's going to be a lot of hard work to be done. I don't think we can do it in, 52 days? I always mess that up. I think it was 50, yeah. I don't think we can do it in 52 days. I think it's going to take us, it might take 52 years, but it's going to take a generation at least to truly rebuild the walls. And you can kind of see some of the ingredients, some of the bricks with which we need to rebuild. I'll actually give you 8 of the bricks that we have to rebuild with. Truth, and we kind of already mentioned this, but this is where America veered way off, is when we bought into moral relativism. We bought into this idea that that's your truth, I've got my truth, you've got your truth, everybody just do whatever's right in their own eyes. There is no more, absolute truth. And I mean, it's just led to complete chaos in the culture. The Declaration does not say, I love the speech Newt Gingrich used to give, where he'd say, the Declaration does not say, where it says we hold these truths, it did not say, being randomly gathered protoplasm, we have gathered together for the moment to consider the possibility that if it doesn't offend any particular special interest group, that maybe we'll try for... That's not what it says. It says we hold these truths to be self-evident. In other words, this is truth. The laws of nature and nature's God, the laws of nature reflect this. It's self-evident that these are truths. We got to get back to that place. The line after where I stopped in the Declaration, where he talks about altering or abolishing and instituting new government, he said, when you do that, you have to lay a foundation on such principles and organize its powers in such forms that shall seem to them the most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Now, what that means is that we create society and we reinforce it with a foundation laid on principles that will last. We call them the timeless principles of liberty. But then we organize its powers. That means, who do we give power to? When we look at a public policy, the question should always be who decides. And so when we give the answer to who decides to Washington, D.C., or to the state government or local or to the church or to the family, we got to be thinking about how we're organizing its powers. Great debate's going to happen over the next few days. Does Donald Trump, does the President of the United States have the authority? Did we organize the powers of our government in such a way that he has the authority to send in the bombs to Iran last night? Or does he have to wait on Congress? Well, let me answer that for you very quickly. He absolutely has the authority to do that. He is the commander-in-chief under Article 2, Section 2. And yes, Article 1, Section 8 does give the Congress the authority to declare war. But guess how long we've been doing this, where a president gets to take immediate action and then go to Congress? All the way back to Thomas Jefferson and the Barbary Powers. Okay, so from 1801 and Thomas Jefferson all the way up through Reagan and Grenada, and you just go through the list, Obama and Libya. I mean, the list is long. Now, yes, we have a War Powers Act in the 70s that says that he's got to explain to Congress within 48 hours what he did, and he has to actually get their permission to continue it past 60 days. There's some ways you can get another 30-day extension, but frankly, Obama kept going with Libya way past the 60 days without permission. All of that to say, this give and take of this separation of powers is how we organize the power. So Jefferson's words really do fit for what we're going to be debating over the next few days. And anyway, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. Okay, so we lay our foundation on such principles and organize those powers in such forms. Now, we do this based on the truths that the heart is evil and no man can know it. What we talked about earlier, the separation of powers, is because of Jeremiah 17:9. We base this on the truth that we know the nature of man. So we want to have the checks and balances as often as we can. All of that is how we designed our society, and we've got to rebuild with those bricks. The other brick is, of course, God being in the equation. And you see it all throughout the Declaration. Laws of nature, nature's God. All men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator. Our reliance on divine providence. All of that right there in our founding document. And removing God from the equation, we talked about in the first service. And, clearly that is on the... God's on the comeback in America. I mean, did you see President Trump last night say, "God, we love you"? I mean, folks, this is stuff that hadn't happened in our lifetime, right? That bullet grazing his ear in Butler. I mean, you probably talked about it during Easter, but I mean, that Easter proclamation, the gospel was proclaimed in solid truths from the highest office in the land, folks. I mean, it was not, let's all have a great time with our families this weekend. It was death, burial, resurrection, came to save our, I mean, it was incredible. So anyway, all that to say, we finally, I think, have turned the corner in politicians running from any expression of faith and instead recognize, and I think a lot of it had to do with the assassination attempt on President Trump in Butler. But another side, I keep going down these little side trails. But when I watched him get up and do the fight thing and that blood coming out of his ear, I immediately thought of George Washington, because at the Battle of Monongahela, when he was 23 years old, and he had the bullet holes in the jacket and the horses shot out from under him. Most of y'all probably heard that story. He had bullet fragments in his hair, had a bullet hole in his hat. Incredible story. And we investigated this thing during our Chasing American Legends series that we did a few years ago. And what we found were 2 letters from Washington the day after the battle. Now, he's 23 in that battle. He fought for 3 hours with every other officer being shot down. And the Indians just gave up shooting at him. They said he was being protected by the Great Spirit. But after these bullet holes, all this stuff, battle's over. Next day, he writes to his mom and to his brother. And to his mom, he says, God, I don't know why God protected me, but the hand of providence was clearly covering me and all this. He's 23. And by the way, Samuel Davies, a pastor in Virginia, 2 weeks later hears about this and preaches a sermon and says, "Who knows, but this young Colonel Washington may be used of God in the future of..." But the cool thing, the reason I brought all this up is because the second letter to his brother, notice he did not tell his mama this, but he did tell his brother this. He said to his brother, the bullets were flying past my head, and they sounded like music to my ears. Really? Now that's a special kind of guy, right? That is a gift of, what's that psalm about? He teaches my fingers to war. Anyway, Psalms 144, I think it is. It's the one Barry Pepper's quoting in Saving Private Ryan as he's racking his rifle. But all of that to say, when Washington described it like that, and then I see Trump get up with that bullet, not whizzing past it, actually shooting him in the ear, I'm thinking, man, this guy is another bulletproof Washington, or bulletproof president, just like George Washington. And of course, there's the other story about Washington, where the greatest sniper in the Revolutionary period, Patrick Ferguson, on the British side, had Washington in his sights. And he didn't know it was Washington at the time, but he said, "I felt nauseous. A nausea came over me that I should not shoot." And so he didn't shoot. And then he said Washington turned and looked at him as he sauntered off. Bulletproof president, no question about it. God's hand was on his life. And I think that is very true of President Trump as well. And so anyway, I love the fact that we can talk about this, that we can teach this. The Coach Kennedy case, as I said earlier, has changed everything. And getting the Creator, that God consciousness, back into our culture. There's actually some specifics I'll get to in a second and just run through them just to give you a taste of what's coming over the next year. One of the other bricks, I'm not going to spend time on this, but we've shied away from this too much in the big church. I know you haven't in this church because Paul teaches the whole gospel, but economics is not something we should be staying away from. It's something we should be teaching in the church. Godonomics, or kingdomonomics, as my friend Charlie Lewis has written a whole book about. We've got to get back to teaching that. The whole free market system is based on the Bible. There's so many scriptures that back up the fact that I'm not going to pay you unless you bless me, and I'm going to bless you with my dollars if you bless me with a product service, and all the parable of talents. The whole way we deal with employment, and government should not be involved in that. Jesus does a whole parable on that where the guys come in working at different times throughout the day, and he makes that very clear statement at the end. It's between you and me what you're going to get paid. It's one reason when we say abolish governments, we need to abolish the Department of Meddling. The Department of Labor. what business is, I love the fact, I don't love it, I hate it actually. We have these city block long buildings in our states. We have all these departments of labor and at the federal level of all these people that their job is to tell us how to do our job. Their job is to tell us how to run our businesses. Now, it's insane. It's crazy. Anyway, pursuit of happiness, we got to get back to teaching economics. Consent, I already talked a little bit about, but this is the whole thing of us being engaged, giving or refusing consent. So many different ways that we can do that. And the Declaration, of course, talks a lot about this. And in fact, the reason people don't give or refuse consent more, the reason we sit back, and frankly, we saw it happen over the last 50 years, Jefferson describes this. So, in fact, I stopped here, but this is the next line that he said. He said, prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. In other words, you don't throw out and abolish that government because of the pothole in the road or some little thing, right? They shouldn't be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. Lots of big fancy words to basically say, we'll put up with a lot because we're busy. We've got things going. I'm coaching Little League. I'm running my church, or I'm running my business, or I'm doing all this stuff. And they start this new tax. I want to go fight that, but I don't have time I'll just put up with it. Or they add this new regulation. They pass some, I just don't have time to go fight that. I'll suffer that evil because I'm busy over here doing all these things. So mankind will suffer evil while that evil is sufferable. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing inevitably the same object of offenses is designed to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and institute new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient suffrage of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to throw off their former government. So that's essentially what happened to them, and that's essentially what happened to us over the last few years. We just reached this place where it was like, I've suffered, enough is enough. You're grooming children in our public schools? You've got all this trash in our libraries at the public schools? You're gonna tell me that I can't open my church? Gavin Newsom, you're going to tell me we can go to church, but we can't sing? I mean, we finally just reached a place where it's like, this absurdity has got to stop. We suffered the evil long enough. So thankfully, that just a little bit of the tough times has shaken a lot of people out of their slumber. And we're basically saying, I'm going to take the time to show up at the school board meeting. I'm going to take the time to show up at the whatever. We're going to get up and give or refuse our consent. Now, we've got an attitude and a mindset at Patriot Academy called Be Dangerous. We are sick and tired of playing it safe. I hope you are as well. The whole safetyism thing is killing America. The whole idea of, oh, government, just save me. I'll stay at home. I'll do whatever you want. Just save me. That is not how the American people were designed. That's not in our DNA. Our DNA is the kind of people that ran into burning buildings on 9/11 to save lives. Our DNA is made up of those kind of people like the Immortal 32 down in Texas that came from Gonzales and fought their way into the Alamo to die for liberty. Our DNA is a DNA in fact, we talk about it. We say we're the land of the free and the home of the brave. We're not going to be the land of the free if we're not the home of the brave. I mentioned Reagan earlier. He had this great line in his speech that he gave the first, when the shuttle exploded. I think it was 86, the first one, and he comes on TV that night. I was in high school at the time, and he says, I'm speaking to the school children of America. He said, you may wonder why we would take such a risk, why we would send people into space when we knew that this could happen. He said, the future does not belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. The courage that you have to be willing to risk, to put it on the line. Just think about westward expansion. I mean, everything about the American story was not because we played it safe. It's because we were willing to be dangerous. You might have seen Victor Marx in that promo. He's got a great book out called The Dangerous Gentleman. You're not a gentleman unless you're capable of being dangerous. And you're not, if you're just dangerous and you're not a gentleman, you're not what we're looking for either. This is also a manhood talk. We could do that later. But the whole point is we've got to stand up and be engaged. And that means putting some things on the line. When I said, sacred honor, your reputation, that's dangerous. When you stand up and speak truth, when you're willing to say this is right, this is wrong, I love you, but I'm going to speak truth because of that love. We often say, my pastor, Jimmy Pruitt, he says, it's not just we speak truth in love, we speak truth because of love. Because I love you, I'm going to say, hey, man, what you're doing is going to destroy your life. If your buddy comes to you and says, I just can't, I can't live having sex with one woman. I'm now going to have adulterous affairs once a month. Oh, would you actually say, oh, well, you just be you. You just do you. You do whatever. No, you'd say, man, you're going to destroy your life. You're going to destroy your family. Don't do this. We're going to speak truth because of love. That applies to everything. Okay, I already talked about alter or abolish it. So just getting that mindset of challenging the status quo, whether it's at the federal level. I think we got to get rid of the Center for Demented Confusion as well. A better one would be Center for Disease Creation. Pretty much what they've done. Anyway, local government too, though. It's not just federal government. We need to get out of this mindset that your local, county engineer is saving you from your neighbor harming you. What they're doing is they're preventing you from living out your pursuit of happiness with your land. This idea that we have to go to the government for permission to add a room on our house or to build a guest house for our kids or mother-in-law or whatever, that's insane, folks. If you have to ask permission, you're not free. And they don't know better than you what to do with your land. You know best what to do with your land. So these local government land control freaks, we got to stop that too. Okay, free speech. This one we could spend a while on, but I am so glad that we've started embracing this again. I have an expression. I always say we're either going to have civil discourse or we're going to have civil war. We have to have the ability to hear each other out. Now I'm talking to us as well. We need to hear the other side out sometimes. And let me be really get in your kitchen for a second. Some of you have kids that have gone another direction, maybe because we sent them off to whatever that school was, and they're possibly total prodigal and estranged right now. It could be living in sin. It could just be political differences in the whole COVID thing. There's a lot of families that split over that. It could be that they're, come home with a leftist philosophy and they're blaming you. It's all your fault and all your ilk and whatever the reason. Reach out to them and start rebuilding the relationship and having some civil discourse. Take them to lunch, do whatever you got to do to get the. It doesn't mean you're condoning what they're doing. I'm not saying you go to them and say, oh, it's okay, you just be you. I'm saying you go to them and say, I want to understand why you made that decision or how you came to that conclusion. I'm genuinely curious, and be genuinely curious. That's how civil discourse works. That's why Patrick Henry said what I was quoting earlier about this is how we arrive at the truth. Sometimes I'm wrong, and if I'm wrong, I want to know about it. I mean, I was wrong once back in the 80s. Happens, I'm wrong all the time. We all make mistakes or we get bad research or whatever, and the sharpening of each other's countenance is what gets us to the right path and the truth. So anyway, I don't know who that's for, but reach out to those kids and rebuild that relationship so you can have civil discourse. And of course, we see throughout the Declaration opportunities for free speech. They declare the causes. These are facts submitted to a candid world. They're petitioning our constitutional First Amendment, petitioning for a redress of grievances. There's so much there in the free speech side of things. Two more bricks real quick. Life and liberty requires blind equal justice. I have grieved over the last 4 years watching our justice system be completely turned on its head. We went from biblical justice, which means neither Jew nor Greek, neither rich nor poor. We treat everybody the same. That's the whole blind justice thing when you see the scales of justice statues. We went from that to social justice, which means you're going to be treated in court based on the color of your skin, based on the political affiliation, based on your religious affiliation, whether you have, it is so evil and so wrong. And we had those problems in places in America throughout our history, no doubt about it. And we righted those wrongs. We became a more perfect union. But man, we took a huge step back in the last 4 years. And thankfully, our Department of Justice, even though it became the Department of Injustice, and the FBI and all the things that happened over the last 4 years, thankfully, there is a changing that's happening and turning. It's not happening as fast as everybody wants it to happen. I understand that. You're talking about a cesspool of a bureaucracy that's going to take time to turn around. But all of that to say, I am praying that we have a restoration of biblical justice in our country. We're getting some justice with the pardoning of the J6ers and some of these things that have happened. But to truly restore justice and truly restore faith in our institutions, there's going to have to be some prosecution of those who did those things. You're going to have some actual justice happen so that we can then have faith in the system. And so I pray coming, and if it doesn't, we're going to need to be calling for it. So the Declaration, of course, talks a lot about these things. The only one I'll point out, just to give you another example real quick, this is one of the 27 grievances in the Declaration. He's combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts, I love Jefferson's language here, of pretended legislation. That's essentially what Joe Biden was trying to do with the World Health Organization. He was trying to give our authority to an international group that's not recognized by our Constitution. It's unacknowledged by our laws. It pretended legislation that they would be doing, but yet they would have the power to tell us what to do in a pandemic or even in a plandemic. And so thankfully that was defeated. But that required, all of these justice ideas require an understanding of our system of justice. There's one of the grievances talking about being deprived of trial by jury. We certainly saw that. Okay, last one on the bricks. This patriotism thing is something we have to embrace. We call it, you think back to 9/11. Remember after 9/11 happened, there was a renewed patriotism. I mean, people were waving the flag. They were driving trucks and had the flag on it. We had rallies. Even Congress stood out on the steps of the Capitol building and saying, God bless America. There was a renewed patriotism. It was really caused by fear. We had been attacked on our own homeland. There was suddenly a fear that said, man, we need to come together. Our way of life could possibly be threatened. And so people started waving the flag, some for the first time in their lives, some for the first time in years. But it was just renewed patriotism. It wasn't informed patriotism. So when the shock of 9/11 started fading into history, when the winds of catastrophe appeared to die down, the patriotism faded. And all of a sudden, we lost that renewed patriotism. I think we have the opportunity with the 250th to have an informed patriotism. That's why I say next year we want them waving the flag, but understanding why the flag is worthy of being waved. That's going to require us to embrace this concept of patriotism, not run from it because we're afraid somebody's going to call us a nasty name. The founders, I mentioned Rush earlier, they actually said patriotism was absolutely necessary to preserve a country, to pass a country on. And patriotism is just nothing more than believing in the values of your country and being willing to sacrifice to defend and protect those values. That's what patriotism is all about. And when our young men are not willing to sign up and die for our liberty, then that's a real problem. That's why this turnaround in the last 5 months, where we've seen record-breaking recruitment for the military in America, that's a really good sign of the health of patriotism being renewed in the country. And so it's going to take a lot of good things happening at that level for that to continue. But my whole point is we should not shy away from patriotism because they use these nasty terms to make us think, we're a Christian nationalist because we're a patriot. We need to actually be running to that and actually infusing that into our children and our grandchildren. So we've actually got some new materials coming out for the kids, some patriotic books for the kids so you can teach them from a young age. This is just something we're going to have to do on purpose. It doesn't happen by accident. Just because you're born in America doesn't mean you understand patriotism or understand what America is about. I can tell you right now, a kid born in Austin, Texas will make you just as good a communist as one born in Beijing or Moscow. In fact, with our education system and the way Austin's gone, they probably have a better chance of becoming a communist in Austin, Texas. It's that bad. So it really depends on what they're taught, what they learn, the role they see government play in their life. That's our job, to make sure that patriotism is real. And so that's why we're going to do this course, is to instill patriotism in a new generation of Americans over the next year. We've already got 1 million people that have been through biblical citizenship and constitutional life. We want to put 4 million through this Rebuild Liberty class so that by July 4th, we have 5 million informed patriots. We've got about 30,000 Constitution coaches right now. We're shooting for 100,000. 10,000 candidates flooding the zone. And we're training the campaign managers and the staffers and all of that to back them up. And then 5,000 celebrations. There's 20,000 communities in America that have 500 or more people. And so we're shooting for 25% of those communities to have celebrations on the 250th. And here's what I'm going to ask you to do. So here's your life, your fortune, and your sacred honor. Your life, I'm going to challenge you just for the next year. And hopefully you'll get so hooked on it and you'll enjoy doing it, you'll do it for the rest of your life. But for the next year, spend 2 hours a week investing in freedom. Now that means attending the Wednesday nights for the Rebuilding Liberty class that we're going to have here at the church. So you can do that for those 4 weeks. That'd be basically 2 hours. The videos will be a little less than an hour. Spend an hour talking about it and what you can do in your community. Do that for 4 weeks and then maybe do biblical citizenship or attend another class or go knock on doors for a candidate or go work at the local soup kitchen. Whatever it is, invest in your community and in freedom. 2 hours a week. So this is the 2-2-2. 2 hours a week, 2% of your fortune. And I'm dead serious about this. Just for the next year, slice off 2%, whether it's your monthly income or savings or get rid of the boat or stop playing golf, whatever, you find whatever it is that you can make a 2%, that's a little bitty, 2%, and either give that extra 2% to the church or give that 2% to Liberty pastors to be able to go train pastors, give that 2% or part of it to Patriot Academy or Wall Builders or a candidate, maybe even invest in your own campaign to run for local office, but just find a way to slice off 2%. You don't have to give everything like the founders did, but 2%. And then 2 posts per week. Why am I saying posts? You're probably, most people don't have time to go create a video like what you just saw Paul explaining the Israeli situation. Most people don't have time to even go research and make sure their facts are right on a post. You can share a post that I put out on Patriot Academy or that Paul puts out or David Barton or somebody else, and if you'll just do that 2 times a week, you're putting your sacred honor on the line. I get it. Once you share that post, you're going to get, Aunt Matilda's going to be upset with you or your niece that's a, radical leftist from going to UC Berkeley or whatever. I get it. You're always thinking about that when you're about to post. 76% of Christians self-censor right now. 76% because of those things right there. You got to stop that. Put your reputation on the line at least for the next year. 2-2-2. 2 hours a week, invested into freedom, 2% of your fortune, and 2 times a week putting your reputation on the line. Okay, I'm not going to go through all those. That's our... Oh, I do want to mention this, the 10 Commandments, in God we trust. If you don't have that at all of your local governments here, take on that particular part. And you'll learn more about this in Rebuilding Liberty. Getting the 10 Commandments back up, getting chaplains in all the local schools, getting Bible curriculum in local schools, doing time release. There's so many things that we can do. If you want to be encouraged, that right there, that's just 10% of our Constitution coaches in the country. Okay? There's a movement happening, and we're challenging you to do it. Let's close with this. You got to become that informed citizen. That's part of your life, studying the Constitution, the Founders' Bible, studying the candidates, voting. I know Paul teaches y'all to do all that. I started with Noah Webster in the first service. I'll close with him. He said, when you become entitled to exercise the right of voting for public officers, let it be impressed on your mind that God commands you to choose for your rulers just men who will rule in the fear of God. The preservation of our government depends on the faithful discharge of this duty. If the citizens neglect their duty and place unprincipled men in office, the government will soon be corrupted. Laws will be made not for the public good so much as for selfish or local purposes. Corrupt or incompetent men will be appointed to execute the laws. It'll all be on Hunter Biden's laptop. That's not. Sorry, I thought that was in there. The public revenues will be squandered on unworthy men, and the rights of the citizens will be violated or disregarded. If our government fails to secure public prosperity and happiness, it must be because the citizens neglect the divine commands and elect bad men to make and administer the law. So that's our job, folks. We've been given this incredible talent of freedom. We've been given that talent of freedom at a moment in time, an inflection point in American history where we get to be the ones rebuilding the walls, rebuilding the foundation in this country so that we're no longer a disgrace. Let's pledge to each other our lives, fortune, sacred honor, and make this thing happen. Let's take advantage of this opportunity. Let's honor God with this talent that he gave us. I want to hear, well done, thy good and faithful servant, not wicked and slothful servant. God bless you guys, and thanks for having me this morning.